Jag tror att vi kan börja nu lite senare. Hej allihopa som sitter här och hej ni som sitter online. Jag tänkte jag skulle få kort presentera mig själv med understryk kort. Och great innan jag lämnar över till huvudpersonerna för den här sessionen. Som är gänget som står runt omkring här. Men kort. Homan Hjelmer-Elfström heter jag och är representant för Great. Och för er som inte vet där hemma eller vart nu ni sitter i bilen eller online i alla fall. Och ni som är här så är Great då en organisation där vi skapar en arena för samverkan för företag, organisationer och andra runt omkring här i Västsverige. Och ämnet är IT-infrastruktur. Vi startade 2004 och idag är vi cirka som ni ser här 50-tal medlemmar. Och huvudsyftet är alltså att skapa samverkan, att länka ihop olika aktörer, även konkurrenter med varandra för att skapa buzz, för att skapa innovation och utveckling inom regionen. Det är det som är syftet och det är egentligen det som Well Connected står för längst bort där. Vi har 8 till 10 aktiviteter per år och det här är ett sådant tillfälle och det kommer komma fler så jag kommer göra lite reklam för här innan jag kliver bort och lämnar över. Vilka är då med i Great? Det är alltså olika medlemmar och det är inte bara företag utan det är även organisationer, föreningar, kommuner, alla möjliga. Det är en öppen arena för alla just med samverkan och digitalisering i fokus. Det är det som är syftet med Great då. Och här ser ni också våra 2 huvudsponsorer som är Göteborgs stad och VGR då. Och vi har 3 huvudben. Det ena är då som ni ser infrastruktur och säkerhet. Det andra är health tech och det tredje är Internet of Things. Och där jag är lite mer engagerad, därför jag är här idag. Innan jag kliver av så vill jag göra lite reklam. Jag hoppas få se alla 60-talet som är och lyssna på det här. Att anmäla sig omgående till eventet som sker på Lindholmen Science Park 29 november. Och vi har en fantastisk talarlista med Johan Sjöberg från försvars och som är expert på försvars- och säkerhetsfrågor och rådgivare till regeringen. Vi har vd på Göteborg Energi. Vi har Lena Apler som är, ja, de flesta tänker väl Draknästet. Jag tänker väl kanske andra bedrifter hon har gjort innan dess. Bland andra företag och duktiga talare som kommer vara på plats. Så jag hoppas att ni hoppar in och anmäler er. Det är en halvdag på Lindholmen Science Park. Och den anmälan kan ni göra på great-it.se. Hoppa in och gör det om ni inte har gjort det. Och det finns fler event på vår hemsida. Gå gärna in där och titta. Och är ni inte medlemmar, se till att ert företag blir medlem. För att det här är en värdefull arena att vara på och samverka på. Det var allt jag hade. Och vem ska ha micken?
Nej, han har ju inte.
Han har den.
Han har ordet. Varsågod,
ordet är ditt.
Tackar. Det kör på engelska då?
Ja, just det.
All right.
Switch. All right.
Let's switch. Welcome everybody. My name is Mikael Jagelid and I'm a trend nerd for consultant in strategies and business innovation. I got the luxury to work with trends every day. Now, trends, we use that word quite differently. Through definition could mean several different things. We often refer to trend as a current style, preference, or the flavor of the moment. But more common as a trend is something that we can observe to change over time, some kind of movement or direction. And we see quite a lot of movements and directions over time. And they tend to remain the same over the last few years. The mega trends that affects us all, everywhere on the planet, in the long term and the short term. They are unstoppable, but we can change them. We can affect them in our decisions and the kind of technology that we bring to the market. We have a few key technology trends still heavily funded by pretty much all industries around the world, spawning new applications and new products and new behaviors. But technology trends are not important at all unless we can apply them to solve problems and make change. Trying to create value for shareholders, for the society, or for the planet. And that implies a great responsibility for our decision makers. The cooperation between industry and politics have increased tremendously over the last few years and is now more important than ever. That's why a venue like WebSummit, where industry and politics join forces on the same stage to discuss and to tell the world that tech is key to make the planet a better place. And that's why we want to keep an eye and ear on WebSummit. And that's why I sent 2 carefully calibrated sensors to Lisbon, my colleagues Millie and Johanna. And they will bring you on an explosive ride for the next 45 minutes. Don't even bother trying to interrupt them with questions, because when we press play, you can't stop them. So save your questions until they're done, and then we will have a short session of questions and discussions afterwards. So fasten your seatbelts and welcome Millie and Johanna.
Thank you. All right. So looking at WebSummit over the last year, we can see clear trends and we can see clear changes. We know there's a lot of things going on in the world. This year at WebSummit, the tone of voice has really changed. It's lowered, but it's also raised. All hands needs to be, we all need to put our hands on the deck and act. We need to help each other out to sort this mess out. WebSummit is reflecting current global events. They are really good at it. They are really good at curating content and putting them on the same stage. AI, metaverse, American politics, and of course this year, the economic crisis. We also see a lot about sustainability, and here you can see a clear trend. A couple of years we've been screaming to the tech world, to the politics, to the audience, you need to act, we need to save the planet. This year we can actually see the changes that are starting to happen. We see the innovations that are trying to save the planet. We see the effects of it. Of course, there was no talk this year. I think that we saw about 100 talks during the 3.5 days we were in Lisbon. Not one of them did not mention the war in Europe. The most technically advanced war in modern history. It had a big place at Summit. It affects a lot of people, and it affects technology at its core. So there were a lot of speakers. There were a lot of topics around how to help out, how to act, and how can we, as a technology, as a society of tech creators, how can we help Ukraine in this difficult time? There was a lot of aspects of the war. It was the human aspect, how it's affecting the people. It was the governance aspect. How can we save the digital papers, all the cybersecurity needed to secure a country in terror? It was also the technology aspect, using high-tech machines and advanced technology at the front line. How they are using 3D printers at the front line to print spare parts for the drones to help them in the war. One of the biggest events during this year's WebSummit was the super well-planned surprise appearance from the First Lady of Ukraine, Elena Zelenska. This was, as you can all understand, it was really, really moving. It was really, really powerful, and it was really, really strong. This is a huge arena, and it was silent. Everybody was paying 100% attention. And when she finished, I have not seen a longer standing ovation. But she had a clear message. She asked Europe, she asked the technology industry for help. We are seeing a war where technology is doing harm. And she asked us to rethink about this and start doing good. How can we change and use the new technology to do good? How can we design for good?
Because as Mikael stated before, if we have the tech and we have the trends, what good does it do if we don't utilize that and make something that creates value and creates something for good? And we need that purpose to drive our mission and our vision in our everyday life and in our work. And so this message was really clear, and it permeated the entire conference and every talk and every topic during WebSummit. And it's interesting to look back over the years. We've been to WebSummit, it's 4 years now, and how we can see that the tone of voice have changed and the message have changed as well. So a couple of years ago, if you take sustainability as an example, because that's always a big topic, a couple of years ago, we were still convincing people that the climate change is real, there's a crisis appearing. And last year, we listened to Brad Smith from Microsoft saying that we have to stop giving these big pledges and we have to start showing progress. And this year, it's interesting, as Johanna said before, we can actually start seeing the innovations and we can see the initiatives. And as Lisa Jackson from Apple said, she said, I lost it. No, sorry. We have to do before we talk. So now we're not even interested in listening to you. You have to do something and then you can come back and show us what you've done. So there's been a huge shift and we've seen a lot of different innovations and sustainability actions and initiatives that has become more integrated into our daily work. So we're not talking as much about the need of sustainability actions. We're starting to show the progress we have made. And this is applicable in different industries and arenas. And one of them is fashion, for example. We'll come into that one later. So as Justin Winters, she's the co-founder from One Earth, she says that we're past convincing people. So it is possible to solve the climate crisis, but it requires a global movement of millions of people. And we have to do something because post-pandemic people are feeling even more anxiety about the climate. 7 out of 10 young people have climate anxiety today. So this gives us some hope. We can see some initiatives and we need to inspire each other and act to solve the crisis. And over the years of WebSummit, Brad Smith has kind of become our go-to guy for inspirational quotes. This year, he said that this can be done, but it's up to us to make it happen. So it's not up to the politicians or the big companies, it's up to all of us. And we need to innovate our way out of this mess. And we see innovations now, and as I said before, some of them are within the fashion industry. They have historically been a huge part of issues regarding sustainability and climate, but we see a lot of actions. We did that last year as well. And this year, the focus was a lot on sustainable materials. So we're past kind of renewable materials and we're looking into sustainable ways of creating and maintaining sustainable materials. So, for example, this year we had co-founder of Ganni, which is a Danish clothing brand, together with CEO and founder of Bolt Threads, which is a material solutions company. And what they talked about this year was the rise of new materials. And this is one of them. You see it on the left of the screen. It looks like leather, but it's not. It's very leather-like, but it's called Milo. And so Milo actually stems from a material called mycelium, which we find in mushrooms, as you can see up on the top left. So this leather-like material comes from mushrooms, and Bolt Threads has engineered a process where they can, where they have like a vertical plant, and then they can use that to create this material. And so Ganni has made a pretty bold statement. They have said that by end of 2023, they won't have any virgin leather in any of their collections or clothes or accessories. And so they're really on the forefront of sustainability, and they're working closely with Bolt Threads and with these kind of materials. And Bolt says that the demand for these kind of materials is really big, and they prioritize companies and brands that make the similar kind of statements. So it's happening. We have mushrooms. Another example is an Icelandic fashion brand called Katla, and they're creating clothes and clothing lines with materials that stem from seaweed. So we have mushrooms and we have seaweed, and seaweed actually grows 30 to 60 times faster than on land plants. So they have started like a big seaweed cultivation on Iceland where they use that to then create fabrics that we can see here. It's kind of like silky material. The last one is actually not from WebSummit, but it's on the same topic. It's from Paris Fashion Week, just a couple of weeks ago. We had the company Copalni having Bella Hadid as a model. And she entered the stage practically naked, and then she had a dress sprayed onto her body, which you can see on the video. And this is made from a liquid kind of tissue that then, when it comes in contact with the air, it becomes a non-woven material. So you could actually take the dress off afterwards as well. Let's see. So yeah, we have a lot happening in the fashion industry, but we also have another great example of sustainable solutions.
Yeah, this is Nemo's garden. So this is also a really good example for designing for good and innovating in the gap. So Nemo's garden is developed for its underwater farming, developed to be able to grow on land plants, territorial plants, underwater, because at some regions, due to economics or to the environment, there are hindrances of doing land-based farming. So they have developed this pod technology when they do underwater farming, and it's a self-sustainable system, and meaning, so the effects are it's less CO2 emissions, and there's really no need for pesticides or any other harming chemicals, since the plant and is not coming in contact with air. So they have built this system, and they have tested it as a digital twin during a long time before they actually started producing it and putting it in the water.
Yes, so a lot happening underwater, but what about up in the air? How would you guys feel about getting on an aircraft to commute to work every day, or maybe 1 to 2 times a week, instead of going by car, by metro, or bike, micromobility, whatever? This might actually become reality in less than 5 years. So we have a lot of companies working with urban air mobility. We've talked a lot about mobility and micromobility the last couple of years, but this is actually, we're actually starting to see some progress when it comes to urban air as well. So companies like Eve Air Mobility, which this video comes from, they're working on something called EVTOL, which stands for electrical vertical takeoff or landing. Basically meaning that the plane, instead of going like this that we're used to, they're taking off and landing vertically. And this creates a huge opportunity within city centers, urban areas, because you can use a much smaller space for stations, like getting on the airplane. So they're looking into how they can convert traditional like parking lots or top of houses, skyscrapers and stuff, to have like a helipad, sort of, called vertiports. So this is really fascinating, of course, and it's a sustainable solution itself, just aircrafts. They're also looking into how they can be sustainable in other ways. For example, once the batteries cannot fuel the aircrafts anymore, how can we reuse them on the ground instead? So they're really looking into the whole supply chain, the transportation and option as well. So they want to create a sustainable mobility option that can supplement other options like the micromobility ones as well. So this Eve Mobility, they believe that these will be in air by 2026, and it also helps like the cities where people can move out of the city center and provide a more sustainable solution that way as well. So it's a kind of ring of the water effect if this can happen. And of course, it might not be in Gothenburg, but maybe in New York for starters. But yeah, they're up in the air, they're testing it. They're partnering with United Airlines in America, for example, to make this happen. And they're very, they enable the competition as well, because they're very clear that we cannot do this by ourselves. So we need to be a lot of different players in the field to kind of kickstart this kind of revolution as well. So this is really good for reducing the carbon emissions, which is of course really important. But what we've seen a shift in the climate action kind of paradigm, where we see that carbon emission removal is more important than just reducing it. So in order for us to meet net zero and keeping global warming below 1.0 degrees Celsius, we need to start actually removing carbon from the air as well. And one company who does that is Climeworks. They have just, I think this summer, opened a new facility on Iceland, where they have direct air capturing machines. So all these black small ports are actually fans that traps the air, kind of filters the air, and then can capture the CO2 and store it underground. And so that we see a lot of different initiatives for this as well. I mean, reducing carbon emissions is really important, but we also need to actually remove it from the air. So a lot happening here. But I mean, in our everyday life, we still see problems with sustainability. It's still more costful for us to do the right thing. I mean, it's more important. It costs us more to take the train than going by plane. So Aaron Randall, who is the co-founder and CTO at Supercritical, says that the system is still broken because it has to be cheaper and easier for us to make a sustainable option, or take that option and do the right thing.
Talking about sustainability, this year we could see a change. We weren't only talking about the environment anymore. We are talking about creating sustainable organizations, sustainable workforce, sustainable lives. AI is really big, of course, and autonomous driving. We need to stop by this for a while, because this is interesting. We heard a lot of talks about autonomous driving. We came back and was like, oh, I listened to this, and we heard the completely different point of views.
Yes.
So
I'll go first. So I was listening to a panel with representatives from Google Network and Gridwise, who are both companies working on last mile delivery. So basically autonomous delivery of consumer goods. And they agreed that this is where we have to start. So we have to start in the city center. We go by a lower speed. It's safer, it's smaller, we're not moving people. And when I sat there, I was like, yes, of course, this is very smart. And then when I talked to Johanna, she had a very different view of this. So they agree that we have to start with delivering goods. Of course, it's much more safe than to transport people when it comes to autonomous driving and delivery. It's still a lot of regulations that has to be handled. We'll get into that later on. But yeah, so they agreed that the next step for autonomous delivery is to start in like the city center. We go small, we control the area because it's lower speed and we don't have any people in the actual car robot. Let's call it a robot. Yeah. So yeah, that was my perspective on
yeah, and I
driving.
listen to the long haul delivery as the best way to start autonomous delivery, because taking away the boring tasks from human being, and also being more economical, to stop having drivers sleeping in the car or at hotels for the long haul drives, having an autonomous ride for those session, and then keeping the people to in-city delivery, since the complexity level is so high. So this is also interesting with these trends, that the two perspectives, and they are so convinced that our perspective is the best, and it is interesting, and I don't think there's a clear answer to where to start. So AI was a big topic. Driver's aid is another big thing. How can we help consumers in their cars driving by themselves with AI to make them drive safer, to make it more efficient, more economical, and more environmental friendly. So tools to keep us safe. The possibilities are big. There's a big big audience or a big bunch of talkers talking about how to develop AI and how this is going to be the way forward. We see that the use of conversational robots are increasing. We see that the use of smart home devices like Alexa or Google Home's assistants are increasing. Amazon was there talking about the problems that they have had during the development of Alexa, because building AI for long distance conversations is really hard, because the AI needs to understand, to hear who is talking, understand what I'm saying, and act on that from a distance. And that is it's hard to do, it's hard to understand, and it's hard to make it right.
And so we have a lot of critics as well when it comes to AI. There's a huge crowd that are go AI and it's going to happen and it's going to be as common as Wi-Fi in a couple of years. But what the critics says is that we have a huge problem with the language and language understanding of AI. And one of them was Noam Chomsky. He is an author and a hell of a lot more because he's pretty old, so he's done a lot of stuff. And he says that developing AI today is just playing with fancy toys. And what he means by that is that the engineering might be good, because I mean, we have a lot of good products, but the science is not. So as long as the AI systems cannot distinguish between what's the real world and what's not, they're actually not telling us anything. Because the systems we have today, they can pass the data, but they don't understand it. And it gets biased with all this old data. So he also said that AI today is just autocomplete on steroids. So it's not trying to understand what you're saying, it's just trying to anticipate what you're going to say next. So there's a huge problem with the linguistic part, the science behind AI. And if we start scaling AI as of today, the state of AI today, we're just adding on more of the same issues. So we're just going to have systems that can anticipate our next wording or phrasing or action, not really understanding what's behind it. So he's joking a lot as well, but he's really serious about this, saying that this is a huge threat to democracy. And we have to actually fix this issue before we're even talking about scaling AI or applying AI in a bigger setting. And Gary Marcus, he's an AI scientist at NYU. He was accompanied by Noam during this talk. And he says that, or he believes that year 2023 will be the first year that someone actually gets killed because of AI. And he believes that people trust the systems too much. We have too much trust into all these devices and our conversational robots. And soon enough, we'll start to believe their advice and we'll take some really bad advice from them as well. So there's a huge kind of pros and cons when it comes to AI as well. This year, last year as well.
All right, so we're going to have a short talk about super apps, because that's another thing that is getting bigger and bigger, and we have so many things left to say, so we need to speed it up a bit. So super apps is taking more and more market, because take micromobility, for example. More cities discover, more operators discover that if we collect all the transportation available in our city, we can actually grow our city better. The cities will gain from having fewer cars. And there is a program in Europe right now called 15-minute cities, where you want to make all the big cities in Europe available within 15 minutes. So you could, they are enabling parking spaces, so we don't have the scooters on the sidewalks. They are trying to really summon together all the public transportation with all the privately owned operators to really make micromobility and easy traveling in city easier for us. And this is one of the main usage of super apps during this year, how to enable this consumer to meet the consumer needs. It's in the public's best to be able to travel in city. It's the public's consumers best to be able to do all your shopping in one app. So there are a couple of good examples on how to use and utilize the super app and the new version of the web and the new possibilities with the tech development into providing an easier life for us. And there was really not much automotive during this years. Previous years, we have seen a lot of car companies, a lot of talk about car development. It was almost nothing. So they actually renamed the stage, so it's called Autotech. And a lot of talks a lot of talks about shared ownership, decreasing private owned cars, increasing micromobility, how we will work with that transportation and shared ownership more than the privately owned cars. So when we are into AI and super apps, we need to address the elephant in the room. Web3 was major, and I had to Google. And I will not try to tell you the technology behind Web3 because I do not have the right competence for that. But of course, it was a big topic at WebSummit. It's a tech conference. But there was actually not so much content about Web3 because everybody talked about the metaverse and what Web3 can do for the metaverse. Web3 is just an enabler.
Yes. So the metaverse and Meta, of course, it was a buzz this year as well, probably bigger last year. But it's interesting. There's a lot of debates going on about the metaverse. There's a lot of people who think that Meta should back off the metaverse. On the other hand, Naomi Gleit, not sure, whatever, she doesn't know. She's the head of product at Meta, and she was there this year. And she was very clear that the metaverse will happen and it will not be owned by them, just as no one company can own the internet. So that's what they say. But there's a lot of people saying that Meta needs to back off, change back the name of the brand, the company and such. However, there is a discussion about how many metaverses will there be. There will be at least one. It will exist. So it's coming in some form, it's coming one or many. And what we're seeing rising already is the use of virtual avatars, which will be the gateway into the metaverse and the immersive experiences. So a lot of startups, a lot of companies working on how to create your avatars and how to use them in a immersive world, which the metaverse is anticipated to be. We're also seeing a lot of immersive experiences where you combine physical, digital, and meta. And you can't really categorize them individually anymore. You have to look at the entire spectra of different kind of experiences. And this is one example. It's the TSX building in New York on Times Square. They want to kind of reimagine the experiences of the future. So they're actually going to build like this super duper mega big screen, which of course rhymes well with Times Square. But it's also a hotel, it's an office space, it's an actual stage, the one you can see down there. The other one is like a billboard where you can broadcast content or concerts wider and broadcast to the world. So they're combining 3D, they're combining physical experiences, and this is actually reality happening pretty soon. So we'll see more of these kind of experiences. They're doing an immersive experience on Empire State Building as well. When you're waiting in line, they're trying to make that experience better and more integrated into the history of Empire State Building as well. So this is something that we'll see pretty soon when it comes to the metaverse and immersive experiences.
We could see a lot of big companies, they are agreeing that this will happen. It's a natural development of the internet. IKEA is planning to use the metaverse to really enable creativity and connecting their customers and end users closer to the company. They are moving away from the stores because the metaverse enables them to have an online experience in a store-like matter. Declaton has a great vision for how to use metaverse to enable sports and sports activity to all people, no matter what your activity level, your sport, or if you have any disabilities. Lego they stood up a bit from the crowd because their vision and their idea is more holistic. They are talking about the people and how to lead both in organization and against their end users, how to lead with creativity, how to build an organization that helps you drive and reach your goal, how to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. So they have a really big focus for the children. And the take on in Lego's vision for the metaverse is how to build one or many metaverses, but with children in mind. Can we create a safe place in the metaverse where children can travel safely? Can we build metaverse with digital safety in mind? Regulations is usually a hot topic, and it still is. There is a bit of a change because now we are not screaming about saving personal data or regulating against the big data giants. The focus this year is the problematic gap between the decision makers and the government officials. No harm said about them, but there is a huge gap in competence. They are very far away from the technology. They're having a hard time understanding the technology. And if you do not understand what you're regulating, it's really hard to get the regulations right. And there are, of course, big data, personal data, and privacy issues still. And one famous person, Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the internet, he was there this year as well. He has a different view on what Web3 should be. He's still not happy. He does not like the way the internet has developed, and especially when it comes to the personal data aspect. In Rupt, his company, they have a vision to create a Web 3.0 that is with the personal data storage pods. So I, as a user, own all of my data. I control all of my data, and I can interconnect my data between different systems. So if I want to share my Apple Health data with my with my doctor, I can do that. I can choose to do it as I want, and that will enable me to get a better medical experience. And that's the vision of the new internet from Sir Tim Berners-Lee, that take the control back to the people and make us use our data in the best way we want, so we can get a better user experience. And around the medical part, one of the biggest issues he sees with Web3 is that it's built with blockchain. And blockchain technology is not that safe in his point of view. So his question is, do you really want your medical records on a blockchain?
Sorry. And then on the extreme, sorry, can't speak. Extreme end of the spectrum when it comes to personal data and personal data storage, we have companies like Signal, which is a messaging app. They're very different from others. They're a non-profit organization, and their business model is designed to protect privacy. So when you're using Signal, everything is encrypted and everything is private. So messages and profiles are encrypted, and they don't track anything in the app. So even if a user would want to breach privacy policies, it would be extremely hard. And so their take on the whole personal data discussion, they want to protect democracy. They want to protect, have journalism safe. They want to protect the users. So they have a very extreme point of view, of course, but it does come in handy for a lot of companies that need this kind of protection. So it's a very safe environment to use if you cannot share data, if you don't want to risk sharing your data as well. And it's really interesting because she talked a lot about the costs of protecting privacy as well. So if you're a company and you can consider sharing your data with Google or other big companies as well, it's pretty easy to buy something off the shelf and use. In this case, when you set out to be this private from the beginning, you have to customize everything. So you have to build everything from scratch and make sure that it's protected, it's safe, it doesn't share any data in some unexpected way. So she talked a lot about the cost of protecting privacy as well. It costs a lot more for companies like Signal to have this kind of service up and running. So interesting aspect in regards to other companies trying to control and sort of protect the data, but it's still kind of uncontrolled. On the other hand, we are what we measure. That was a pretty clear message this Web Summit as well. What we can measure, we can improve. And that's also an interesting take on the data. So if you can use the data that your product or service collects about the users and use that to create more or additional value for them, then it's great, of course. And we had companies like Apple, for example. They held a keynote speech about the future of health, of course, from their perspective. And they talked a lot about their work with the Apple Watch, for example, how they can use data collected about yourself and about my health to help you get in control and get like a holistic overview of your health. So they want to use the data, this is what they say at least, to give me as a user actionable insights about my health. So they're looking into how we can prevent heart attacks and how we can, if an accident happens, how can my watch or my Apple ecosystem connect to my family or friends or something like that. So we can shorten that amount of transportation for ambulances or whatever. So that was really interesting as well. But it's, of course, it's just one perspective, and probably Android people won't agree on this. But it's really interesting, and they're seeing a lot of progress as well. They have helped a lot of people in this way. So if you utilize the data your product or service gives you, and you create value, there is a very bright future for having these kind of personalizations at scale. Apple is doing one thing. We heard a lot of other talks talking about this as well, but we have to, as we have talked about this entire talk, design for good. And that is the future if we want to see this personalization at scale as well.
So that was a weird, I missed the crossover there. All right, so digital twins.
Personalization at scale.
Yeah. But digital twins isn't anything new. We have heard it during a long time. We have heard talks about it. We have heard cities using it. So there's nothing new. What is new, I would say, it's the sustainable point of view. How you can use digital twins to do a simulation 5,000 times before you put the shovel in the ground and start building your factory, saving tons of CO2 and water, or saving tons of money with not building the wrong line in your factory. Or you can test your product, you can test your system. So Mercedes-Benz, AMG, Petronas Formula One teams, Toto was there, treated like a big rock star. They have started using digital twins in their work. So they are doing digital twins of all the bits and pieces of the whole car and on the racetrack. because doing all of those simulations, they're allowed to be 90 people on the track, but they have 2,000 engineers in the factory. So they felt forced to do this so they could connect the engineers in the factory to the racetrack and get the best value and be even better at the game. And there was a lot of people talking about the remote work and connecting everything together, and having everything with the operational system should be able to be remotely worked, used and operated to create digital twins and to utilize this in the health or for the better good of the people. So digital twin of your body is being tested now, and they are working with MRI scans to get full body scans for predictive health services. So if you do full body scans, you can earlier detect deviations and you can treat them. But with a body digital twin, you can also test treatments. You can also see how your body would react to a certain medicine or a treatment.
So health tech is definitely on the rise, and it has to be. It's almost 30 years behind when it comes to technology. There is a lot happening and being launched when it comes to health tech, and we listened to a lot of them last year as well. This is really cool innovation made from Anna, let's call her Anna, and her team at Neuroelectronics. It looks like one of those bathing hats, and that's what we've been calling her internally for the last couple of weeks. But so this is a piece of hardware that can actually read your mind. It can read brain waves. It was initially developed for people with epilepsy. So this hat, let's call it hat, could read the brain waves. It could detect early stages of a seizure, and it could stimulate the brain with a chemical, like some sort of, I'm not a brain surgeon, but yeah, it could stimulate the brain so it could stop the seizure from progressing. So that's how it started, but it's actually, they're looking now into how they can use this hardware to do exactly what Johanna talked about, to create a digital twin of your brain. So this is something they're working on right now, and to create that and store it in the cloud, which means, like you said as well, that when it comes to health tech or health in general in the future, if I'm in need of some sort of medication, some sort of treatment, they can try it out on my brain twin first. And in that way, we can risk a lot less, or there's less risk to it. So this is also happening. We'll have full body scans. We will probably have a digital twin of our brain as well, which is really cool. So there are a lot of traditional brands as well. We have these kind of typical health tech companies, of course, with their innovations. We also see a lot of traditional brands pivoting more into health tech. One of them being Philips, for example. They have been around for many, many years, but they're going from a more product orientation towards more consumer and health tech orientation. So they're looking into how they can help people with existing products, how they can build accessories that can coexist with their products as well, to kind of move the health or medicine era from the hospitals into your home as well. So kind of like Apple, they want to move away from the hospitals. They want to give you a better control of your health situation as well. And when it comes to health tech, there's a natural gateway into health tech where Philips have been as well. And it's when it comes to accessibility and developing products then for people with disabilities. Accessibility has been on the rise, and we've talked about that for many years, but it has mostly been when it comes to the digital interface or the user interface as well. So we're seeing a lot of innovations now that can help people with disabilities in their everyday life, which is great. We still need digital accessibility, of course, but there's happening a lot there. So two examples from this year It was the Royal National Institute of Blind People who have developed a pregnancy test for blind people. And I was really amazed by this because I hadn't even thought about the experience for a blind or partially sighted woman today when they have to have someone else tell them they're pregnant or not. So this is, of course, a game changer for these women. So this is happening. We also have Microsoft working with their accessible accessories. So they're kind of creating parts that you can 3D print by yourself, or you can buy them and you can kind of create your own accessible workspace. So they have a lot of different like accessories for the mouse, computer mouse, or the keyboard. And they have included a lot of people with disabilities when they have developed this, which of course creates a better product. I'm not biased at all being a UX designer. So we have heard this before, involving users. That's how we create great experiences. And that's also how we create trust. So if we involve them early on, we can create trust between brands and the consumers or the customers. And trust in brands is not new. They talked about it a lot last year and the year before that as well. And it was a hot topic this year, of course. And what Jeff Shiner, who is the CEO at 1Password, talked about is now more than ever, we're in times of crisis. We have a war, we have the economic crisis as well. It's really important to build trust with your customers and to become a more approachable and trustworthy brand, more than ever. We have talked a lot about trust in brands when it comes to sustainability. We are kind of beyond that now as well, and we're looking into a wider spectrum of difficulty and crisis. So he means that if we can focus on how you can help the customers get through difficult times, we can then build a strong relationship with them, and we can provide solutions they really need, and we become a more approachable brand. So what Jeff Shiner at 1Password, they have tried out different kind of ways to go when it comes to becoming approachable. And right now they are gathering up with Ryan Reynolds, who is, I guess, generally known as an approachable kind of guy, actor, in a series of ads where he kind of tries to portray the conversation of security and make it more approachable in a kind of humoristic way. So you can Google Ryan Reynolds 1Password. They have a couple of ads where he's coaching his football team, which he has bought. So yeah, but what's interesting when it comes to brands and when it comes to UX and UI, and there's a lot of talk about the trends of UX and UI in 2023. I listened to one of them and I was pretty shocked because we are still saying that this is a trend. So they're still saying that talking to users is the most precise way to successful design. For me, this is, if we're talking about trends, this should have been a trend looking back. But yeah, so I think this should be a given in any business, basically. Talking to your users, talking to your customers, that is the way to create good solutions and good design as well. And in order to understand how you and your product fit into their lives, you have to talk to them and you have to understand what they're doing. So we're not talking about users or customers anymore. We have to talk about people, and you have to understand how you can fit into their context as well. So as Jeff Shiner, go-to guy when it comes to good quotes as well, he says that we have to lead with empathy and we have to relate to the person we're talking to when it comes to approachable brands.
So leadership is a really big topic, and it's more actual than ever with the given circumstance and the current events in the world. Leading through crisis, leading a new workforce, leading with a purpose. It's the big buzzwords, and what everybody agreed on is that people are number one in every business, but it's really hard. It's hard to find, to keep motivated, to keep them, to grow organization when a market, as the market has been, when everybody, there's a lot of movement. But it's also hard on the leadership side to understand the change that we are going through and how to cope with that changes. So from this year, Generation Z is the biggest workforce it's the biggest generation in the workforce. This is also the biggest consumer group now. The baby boomers are still the most money, but Generation Z is the biggest consumer group. And this is actually affecting the companies and it's affecting the leadership because Generation Z has a completely different set of values and they are choosing in a completely different way and they want different support in their organization. So there's a lot of things that we need to take into consideration because Generation Z cares for real. They cares about why they work. They cares about the values and they chooses wisely and they are kind of picky. They want to really understand if you as an organization says that you are sustainable, but you're not showing it through all of the organization, they will tell you on it. And so if you're saying that you're doing something, you should stand by it and you should stick to it. Rosie Kropp from Ericsson, she talked a lot about the possibilities with the technology. 6G is on the rise, is coming, but she also talked about the importance of leadership in this time and how it's affected by the economic and the war in Europe, leading through the crisis and a new landscape. And can your company culture really cope with this change? And how can we create a company culture that it's where it's okay to fail, where it's okay to bring your ideas to the table, where it's a nice office to come to. Multiple speakers talked actually about this and how to success during these uncertainties, to create, do you have a roadmap? Do you have a tech map for your organization? Do you have a multi-layer tech map for your organization? Can you stick with your roadmap? Have you backed your roadmap up with a backup plan? And have you backed the backup plan with a backup plan? So a lot of the big leaders talked about the backupping plans because no one knows. So plan for the best, but you really need to be prepared for changes because they are coming and we really don't know yet and we can't really see the effect. We still haven't seen the full effect of the pandemic and now we are in an economic crisis and so the uncertainties are really, really big. Now we're closing off. One of the actually most, for me, memorable talks was Her Majesty the Queen Raina Al Abdullah from Jordan. She talked about the 4 minutes that this year everybody is adding on 4 minutes per day to internet and to being online. Are we spending this time wisely? Are we doing good with this time? Are we spending enough time with our loved ones or are we just playing Candy Crush? The human perspective of this year's Web Summit was a really, really big thing. It went through almost everything we heard when it came back to the human perspective. So this is our key takeaways from this year's summit. So be on brand, stick by your beliefs and show it all the way of the organization. Be true to yourself, be honest and be kind. Thank you.